Hello and welcome to a live author reading with Nancy Kilpatrick. My name is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and here in the virtual studio, the virtual graveyard that I have, a fitting theme for Nancy and the wonderful dark fiction that you're going to read. Nancy, what are you going to share with us today?
I am going to read from book 4 in the Throne's Blood series. This one is Savagery of the Rebel King. So I guess I'll
Excellent.
take it away.
Yeah, so I'm going to step backstage and let you take over full stage while you're doing the reading, and I'll join you when you finish the reading.
Okay. All right. Well, this is a series, and this is book 4. And book 5 is already up on YouTube if you want to catch it. It's not. It's got a little bit of sync problem, but hopefully I don't have that problem today. Um, all you need to know about this series is that there are two worlds involved, two species, and the species are the vampires, which are called vampire for one, it's an old word, and vampiri for more than one, and the humans, which are called sapiens, as in Homo sapien. They're both warlike um, entities, basically, and they have a lot of problems between them over the blood, of course. That's the standard thing with vampires. They want it, and humans don't want to give it. So that's what this is, based on that idea. And this book is called, again, Savagery of the Rebel King. Chapter 1. Gwen pulled gently on the reins. Son, her 2-year-old roan, whinnied once and then shook her head, gray and white mane sending droplets from the waterfall they had just traversed, flying in all directions. Gwen's green ankle boots were squishy. Her bi-colored hair strands dripped water, and the brown and green riding dress her grandmother had carefully selected for her that day stuck to her chest. The warmth of the night would dry everything quickly, but she didn't really care. Being wet was the least of her worries. Absently, she patted Son's neck, listening. They were here already. She sensed them. Quickly, she unhooked the green cape she wore and let it fall onto the horse's back. Then she pulled the crossbow over her head with one hand, the string already cocked and waxed, and at the same time had a bolt out of the sheath and positioned. The safety was on, and she braced the stock against her shoulder, kept her finger close to the trigger, and listened intently for the sounds she was expecting. Nothing. Too much nothing. Not an owl hooting or the feet of a small nocturnal mammal scurrying in the underbrush of this earthy-scented forest. The crashing of the waterfall was loud and drowned out much of the usual noises. She wished she could lower the volume to hear better. Before dismounting, she glanced quickly in all directions. Forest to her left, west. Forest edged by the cliff directly ahead, north. The gorge to her right, east, and she was not far from the drop-off. To the south lay more forest, the mountain with its waterfall that separated and bridged this cliff from the one on the other side of the gorge, their territory from hers. And finally she glanced overhead. The new bruised sky was empty of anything flying, but every cell in her body told her that they were there. More listing, still nothing visual. Even if she couldn't see or hear them, she felt their presence, like a gathering storm. Swiftly, she swung her leg over Son's back and slid to the ground, the crossbow still braced firmly against her left shoulder by her dominant hand. She placed her right hand on Son's flank to steady the nervous horse because animal instincts are acute. Son was aware of them too, and she was a lot less confident than her mistress. Gwen stepped away from the horse, then took another step, listening, glancing all around her, eagle-eyed. Suddenly a shadow flitted by directly overhead, for a second severing the moonlight from the earth. They would have come from the south, which meant that while in flight, they had hunted, and they spotted her, and circled back from the north. She sensed they intended to toy with her, surround her, then zoom in for the kill. The thought crossed her mind that she hoped her mother and grandmother were right. If they were wrong, Gwen wouldn't be alive to watch the two of them meet Crow. More shadows in the growing dusk, and she wasn't sure what to do, but to try to keep aware of them. Her body vibrated on high alert as she focused on discerning their flight pattern. She inched her finger closer to the crossbow trigger, the weapon turning with her body from side to side, swaying almost up and down, ready for any eventuality. Instinctively, she unlocked the safety. Suddenly, one of them swooped from the sky just in front of the large oak tree about 10 meters directly ahead, pale flesh starkly contrasted against the growing gloom. He could have landed right in front of her, but she figured he wanted the drama of her terror as he attacked. She squeezed the trigger. The bolt shot out toward the creature at a split-second speed he couldn't have anticipated. The range, well within the bolt's and Gwen's abilities, startled him. It was a calculated shot. She didn't want to kill, or even maim. She wanted to nail him to the tree behind him, and did, right through his shoulder and one of the feathery raven wings he could no longer furl. The fat bolt had flown too fast to track visually, shoving him back, the thwack as it left the string and the reverb as it struck the tree, breaking the stillness and the silence of the night, leaving just the sound of water bashing the rocks. No sound came from this blood drinker, only a cloister's distance from her, pinned to the trunk of the tree. She felt the others closing in to destroy her. Everything happened at once. He snarled. She had the string recocked and another bolt seated. He reached for the bolt, pinning him to the tree. She shouted in their mutually understood language, "You might not as well bother, vampire." His hand stopped as she saw the new bolt aimed at his chest, but he said in a level tone, as though he was not afraid, "Sapien, your aim is off. Not that it matters. You'll be dead at the hands of my warriors before you can pull the trigger again." "Don't bet on it, vampire. My aim was perfect. The bolt struck where I intended, and if I'm dead, you will be too." As she felt the others closing in, waiting for a signal from their leader, poor Sun stomped her foot and neighed in terror, as if to say, "Mistress, let's get out of here while we still can." She couldn't comfort the animal right now. Her life depended on being as strong as she knew herself to be. "Send them away," she snapped. "Once they're gone, I'll free you." Why should I believe a warm blood, especially one intentionally trespassing on vampire territory with a weapon aimed at my heart? You're just food to me. I don't obey my food. Do you obey yours? He was trying to sound reasonable, while undermining her at the same time as the others moved closer. Distraction, that's his strategy, she thought. "If they don't go, I will shoot you. Sure, they'll murder me, but I'll have this bit of satisfaction, that their leader is dead, shot through the heart. You can take a chance on my aim being as off as you hope it is, but if I were you, I wouldn't risk it. My bolt will cause your heart to explode. It's silver-tipped, like the one burning through your shoulder and your wing. That's why you're stuck there right now." He looked ferocious, his dark eyes glinting red in the twilight, and she didn't know how much control he had, although it was rumored that vampiri for the most part were masters at control. Self-control, maybe, but they definitely excelled at controlling sapiens. She didn't know from experience these were the first undead she'd encountered. Her grandmother had more than frightened her with the stories of vampire viciousness, which made it all the more astounding that she stood here now. But what she saw before her wasn't nearly as worrisome as what had been described, or what she'd imagined. Still, this one did look deadly. "What's it going to be, vampire? Is tonight a good night for you to say goodbye to this world?" Even in the gloom, she could see small black dot centers in those now crimson irises, and focused on his chest about heart level, avoiding staring at his eyes, being forewarned that he would try to mesmerize her, and she felt the pull to look. Finally, he spoke to the others in the language only the vampiri knew, only the vampirian Gwen, who had studied it with one of the scholars in her realm and understood much of it, but could not speak it well. So she said in their mutual language, "No, not in the forest. Tell them to return to your fortress. Otherwise you die." Surprise may have flashed across his features, at least she imagined it had. Her family had told her that vampire facial expressions were subtle, too subtle for most sapiens to pick up on. But his eyes spoke volumes. If he were free, he would have drained all her blood by now. But he wasn't free, and she had to play this correctly to get the desired result. "Unless you're afraid to be alone with me," she added, just as a further challenge. He snapped at the others in the vampiri tongue to return to their stronghold. One tried to argue with him, but he said, "Obey," and that was enough. She had been right. He was the commander, the strongest, the one who would lead the attack, the one they all submitted to. He was the right vampire, and that gave her a small boost of confidence. Around her she heard wings flapping. It sounded like 3 sets. From the corner of her eye she saw them circling above before they headed south. She could feel when the energy changed, and the two of them were alone. Sun felt it too, and while the horse surely wasn't thrilled to have even one vampire in the vicinity, one was better than four, and that made both horse and human sense. Gwen paused a full minute, the crossbow still aimed at him, the safety off, her finger not far from the trigger, waiting. She needed to be in control, which she knew would bother him. She wanted his tension to build. Finally, she walked to him slowly and braced the crossbow aimed at his chest. Fearlessly, he didn't watch the weapon, he watched her eyes, the way a skilled warrior functions, looking for that flicker of lost concentration, or a sign of momentary doubt or indecision. She knew he was trying to beguile her, and that kept her from falling into those orbs, enticing as ruby pools. When she was 3 good steps from him, she made a calculated decision, knowing there would be consequences, but this stalemate couldn't go on long, and she had to take the chance. Now, later, it really didn't matter. I want to talk with you, she said, lowering the crossbow, her eyes focusing on his strong chin, his aquiline nose, anywhere but those mesmerizing red eyes. And then she made another decision, which she hoped would produce the reaction she wanted. She stepped forward and reached for the shaft of the silver-tipped bolt, piercing his shoulder and wing so painfully, so debilitating for him, that he couldn't pull it out. She pulled on the bolt, jiggling it, loosening the silver tip from the tree it was embedded in. In a moment too quick, simultaneously, he hit her. Instinctively, she raised the crossbow. He kicked her arm so that her finger hit the trigger automatically. The bow pointed skyward, shot the bolt through the air, out over the gorge and then plunging to the water below. The blow had sent her flying backwards several meters. She lay on the ground facing the soil, feeling dazed. When she turned over, she saw him yank the arrow from his wing and out through his shoulder flesh with a ferocious growl, an act that must have required spectacular strength because of the silver he had to contend with and the searing pain it produced that ate like acid through his body from the wound. The crossbow lay on the ground right in front of him, but likely he didn't know how to use it, or didn't know how to use it as well as she did. But he was vampire. He didn't need tools. His weapons were talons and teeth, and the sheer power of a supernatural body, a body storming towards her as she tried to crawl to safety. He grabbed her by the hair, yanked her to her feet, and hit her again. This time she twisted as she fell meters away, ending up close to the cliff edge. She heard Sun's fearful protests and tasted salty blood on her lip. She felt dazed and her ears rang, but she had no time to clear her mind. He clutched the fabric of her dress and hauled her to her feet, shoving her backward until she teetered at the edge of the cliff. The waterfall roared in her ears. If he threw her over, she'd die. Well, Mom, Grandma, I'm sorry. I did my best, she thought, expecting the worst. Clearly, he was so enraged that he couldn't speak, his face livid, irises blood red, and sharp fangs extended to terrify her. He pulled her to him, grabbed her long hair, and jerked her head to the side. He was powerful, and she didn't resist, because her grandmother had told her it would be worse if she did. This close, he reeked of sharp copper. His mouth opened as his head reared back like a poisonous snake prepared to strike. In a fractured second, his head snapped forward, and what felt like 2 needles stabbed her throat, piercing deep, and she screamed. He retracted them, leaving behind a searing pain. Instantly, his lips clamped onto the wounds, and he sucked hard, holding her by the bodice of her dress as she flailed on the precipice, believing that he would drain her and then toss her corpse over the rim, the empty rind of a consumed fruit. In desperation, she gasped, I need to talk to you, please. The speaking was difficult, and her throat hurt where his mouth pulled out her life's blood, and with every swallow she felt herself weakening. She had no idea how long this went on. Time felt eternal, but finally it was over, and he pulled away, leaving her so lightheaded he didn't need to push her over the cliff. She was about to fall over. He let go, and her body slumped to the ground, one arm to the shoulder dangling over the rim, one leg and half of her hip, her head dangerously close. If she moved wrongly, she would plummet. He could easily nudge her body with his foot, and she would be gone. Her vision swam, her jaw and nose hurt. Her neck burned with searing pain, and she battled nausea as she watched him stride away. It took every ounce of energy she had left to speak, but she knew his acute hearing would allow him to both hear and understand her whispered plea, Wait, we need to talk. His back to her, he stopped for a second and picked up the crossbow. Be grateful you're alive. I need to talk to you. When he reached the clearing, His dark wings unfurled with a crisp snap, and the terrifying sight of a seraphim from hell. As he leapt into the air, she heard him say, "Come back another night, Food. I'll be hungry again. And next time, stay on your own turf."
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for treating us with that. Just popping up the cover, Savagery of the Rebel King. So this is book 4 in a series.
Yeah.
What can you share with listeners about this book in this particular series?
Well, each book in the series has at least two main characters that it is their story. So you get that in book 1, book 2, book 3. They all have characters that have not appeared before or haven't appeared in the way that they are now in the story. So this is a new character. The vampire's name is Necros, and the woman in the series is called Gwen. She is a queen of the Sapien realm, and so it's a complicated intermeshing of relationship and the power between the two species and the things that have happened in the past that are part of the present as well. So there's a lot to it, and basically this is two new characters introduced, but every book brings the characters from the previous book in. So you have two characters from the first book are in the second book, and the two characters in the second book plus the two characters in the first are in the third book, and so on. So even though the stories focus on different main characters, there's a build-up. It's like a continuation where it is a community of beings that are meshed in each other's worlds. And so in this book, that's what you're going to get as well. And so I did read book 5 already, so I think anybody who knows, who has read that or have a look at it, they'll know that all the characters from the other books have moved into that one too, even though the main characters are other. So yeah, so it's hard to, it's hard for me to synopsize what these books are about. I mean, each book has a title, of course, and in the title is a word that tells you what the book is about. You don't have to go far to figure it out. This book, Savagery, is what it's about. Book 1 is revenge. Book
Okay.
2 is sacrifice. Book 3 is abduction. This is book 4, and book 5 is anguish, and then there's a book 6 coming. So these key words are in the title, and you don't have to stress, what am I going to be reading about? We're going to be reading about savagery in this particular book, which you get a taste of already, because
Yeah.
the vampire is by nature savage, and they are both species that are very warlike. The human beings have vast armies that are killers, and then the vampires, they have their own type of army, as it were, and both realms have rulers of some sort, and so the rulers are ones just like real life. Rulers. So that's what it's about, and yeah, I hope people will be interested enough to go have a look at it. Obviously for sale, of course. Why else am I doing this?
It's in hardcover, trade paperback, and ebook.
Yeah, this is the beautiful hardcover. If you can see it, I never know how. Okay, that way. Yeah, yeah. It's like a pretty cover, really pretty. I mean, you put up the image of it, but this is the actual book.
The actual hardcover, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really, really very pretty. They're very well done. They're done by Crossroad Press, and they do a good job. Looks really nice, and everything's fine.
Excellent. Well, and speaking of savagery, there's a way that he speaks to her that is very savage.
Yes.
And he references multiple times about "you're my food,"
Yes.
and I don't obey my food. And so
Yeah.
that was cutting. That was actually a dark, slightly humorous, but dark humor, cutting,
Yes.
obviously savage, right?
Yes, but these are vampires, you see. They're not human beings. So we can't apply our moral values to them because
Ah,
they are not human beings. They are
okay.
other, and they can do what they want and say what they want. They don't have our moral values. And the sapiens, the humans in this story, are just as vicious as the vampires. And
Yeah.
they're just like some of the more brutal realms in our world, the despots that are surround us on this planet. People who just they take what they want, they do what they want. Somebody's in their way, they kill them, they get them out of the. This happens all the time. So the
Yeah.
human beings do this too. I mean, this is what they're about. And so they're all like this, you know. And I think what I try to do in the books, because this is the way these two groupings are, is to find a way through the personal to find a way out of this, to find
Right.
another way, because this is a very, it's like with a lot of people in the real life, you know, it's not necessarily a wonderful life, but there are ways to help things change. And I do believe in change. So it just comes about through the personal is much easier to make the change than the big picture.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Some comments actually. Just Caro says very exciting opening.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
it was riveting. And Sephra says great reading.
Oh,
So
thanks, Seth.
obviously, yeah, some uh, other folks out there besides me were enjoying this reading, which is a wonderful tease into what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
That's like, you know, the first chapter is always that, you know, what's going to happen now?
Excellent. And may I say it was interesting that there were savage people on both sides.
Yes, for sure. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, that's what you find a lot of that in the books, that the humans in a way are even worse than the vampires,
often,
because
yeah,
the
it's the
vampires
case.
have sort of a morality to what they do within their realm. The humans are just monstrous in a lot of ways. Um,
Yeah. Interesting the parallels that we can draw with with current society.
yeah, really.
Yeah.
Okay, well, before we go, I want to thank Mark for, again, you know, getting back from his camping trip and doing this on the dime, and also the Canada Council, which is sponsoring these, and the Writers Union of Canada, which is the organization through which this really happens. So thank you very much for coming, and I appreciate it, and enjoy your evening or morning or day or wherever you are.
Awesome. And thank you so much, Nancy, for entertaining us with another wonderful reading. Good night, everyone.
Bye.